I know people will be coming on and off, but we will be posting this on our site after. I'll be saving it and uploading it to our website so you can share it with your community, and it will be on madeofmillions.com. So I wanted to first start off by just having you introduce yourself. For the audience, we're both actually located in Canada. I know a lot of our viewers are in the US. I'm in Toronto, Stephanie's in Ottawa. She's also a mental health advocate, and I wanted to, yes, ask you to tell the audience a bit more about yourself and the work that you do and how you kind of fell into mental health advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I live in Ottawa, and essentially, my mental health journey would have started. I guess technically I was about 13, but we didn't really know what was wrong. I saw a child psychologist and didn't really get too many answers at that time. But by the time I was a young adult, I'd say around 18, I had had my first longer term relationship and also had my first bout of anxiety. And I didn't really know what that was. I knew that I was feeling anxious, but I didn't know, why I was having that because I had never been an anxious person before. And that's really where my struggle started, was when I had these romantic relationships. I was in university and I was having a really hard time. And then after university, I had, more romantic relationships and had a difficult time, really intense relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, when you say you were having a lot of anxiety with them, like how was that showing up for you? Like how was it something that you recognized as being not like normal, or not what
Yeah,
other people would experience?
totally. Basically, I noticed that anytime I was apart from my partner, I was really, really anxious. So I had a really high amount of separation anxiety, which was definitely not normal. I think that for someone who is stable and strong, is capable of having a healthy relationship with healthy boundaries and healthy time apart. And I just was not capable of it. Every time I was apart from a partner, I'd have these really strong anxiety attacks, and the first thing I would do was reach out to them to, get them to leave their friends and come to my rescue.
Mm.
So yeah, after a few of those, and of course, relationships failing, I really hit rock bottom. And I got very addicted to anti-anxiety medication. I was on Ativan, and I was on other medication as well, but Ativan was the most habit forming medication. And I had some very strong suicidal thoughts, which led to an overdose and yeah, and some hospitalization. So it was after that I started to build myself back up with a lot of help. We can maybe talk about that after, but I didn't have help to prevent hitting rock bottom.
So
But
when,
after,
just going
yeah,
back. So when, like, because I know I've heard your story, and and I can relate to pieces of it. And what I find interesting is just like, the doctor kind of was like, here, have some Ativan. Like, what did she say when you kind of expressed to her, like, I can't be alone, like I'm, having a lot of severe separation anxiety, like I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling suicidal. What was the reaction? Like, here's some medication, or like, did she begin to even look at what might be happening?
yeah. So she gave me a few resources for like kind of community-based free counseling, um, which was somewhat helpful. But she essentially, yeah, said, here's some depression medication and here is some anxiety medication. And with the Ativan, it was, you take it as needed. But of course, without proper information, I took it as needed, meaning every day, several times a day. So, um, yeah, I wasn't quite educated on the side effects or its habit forming nature.
Yeah.
Um, so and then by the time I was having suicidal thoughts, at that point I wasn't even going to the doctor to tell
Right.
anyone, you know. I was just trying to cope on my own, which was really unhealthy. And yeah, so I didn't advocate for myself. I didn't seek help really.
Sorry.
That's okay. I sought help more like with friends. Oh, there she is. Ah,
Yeah.
hello.
She's gonna start barking if I don't pick her up. So.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, so then eventually you got this diagnosis, which I think, helped you kind of make sense of everything and kind of pick yourself back up.
Yeah.
So what did that look like?
Yeah. So I guess like putting a name to something for a lot of people is very helpful. It certainly was for me. I have this friend Ben who always said, if you can name it, you can kill it. So I saw this as an explanation for a lot of the behaviors that I was displaying in these relationships. So, the severe fear of abandonment, which would cause the anxiety, right? So I was afraid that people would leave me, and it wasn't just with romantic relationships; it was the same with friendships. Um, so it explained this kind of behavior. It explained the intensity of my feelings. So it's not all just bad. I When I felt good and I felt things around me were good, or I appreciated loved ones' happiness, I really really felt it to an extreme. So I felt all colors of the rainbow, but so brightly. When things are bad, it was so severely bad. It was the end of the world. So it just explained a lot of this for me. And from there, I was able to talk to my psychiatrist, and we did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, and that was probably the most helpful. I know that there's also DBT, which they also do for borderline personality disorder, which is the diagnosis. But we did CBT, and yeah, that was like the most helpful. And then from there, it was a matter of kind of having this tool belt with me everywhere I went. So the CBT became almost second nature to me. Um, and I changed my lifestyle. I stopped partying and being out late at night, and I became more active. I spent a lot of time connecting with my closest friends. Um, and I did lose friends throughout that journey, for sure. But it allowed me to forge these really really strong connections with my friends, and my family. So uh, yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, obviously, like, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what borderline personality is. And, like, I know it can manifest so differently for so many people. And some people see it as like split personality. Like, some people just have a lot of like misunderstanding about all of this, as with other mental health disorders. Um, how has that been for you? Because I know you are quite public with your story and you do a lot of advocacy work, and you've done a lot of talks. Like, how has that been for you in terms of like any stigma or any judgment around that?
Yeah, I mean, at first, so I suppose when I first went to the hospital with the overdose, that would have been about 2011. So it's been maybe 9 years. Yeah, or 2010, 2020.
Ten
um,
years, yeah.
yeah, I can't remember. It was either 2010 or 2011. Sorry, during this pandemic, like all the time of my
Yeah,
life is
like what year is it?
right
What
now.
day is it? Where are
Yeah.
we?
But yeah, around that time, I faced the first kind of wave of judgment and a lot of that was self-imposed. So I avoided friends that weren't the closest to me. I avoided areas of the community that I didn't feel the most comfortable. This even meant physical places, like certain areas of downtown Ottawa where, maybe I had spent some time with an ex or something like that. Like it gave me anxiety. So I just wouldn't go there. Um, and that meant that I lost a lot of friendships because I withdrew. And I also just didn't feel comfortable, coming out to them with what I had just gone through. So a lot of that was self-imposed, but there was definitely a little stigma with trying to find health professionals who are willing to take on a borderline personality disorder patient. They did at the time find that those with BPD are the most difficult and they're manipulative. And so, of course, when you're in therapy, the most important thing is to be honest with your therapist. And I think that might be where, this prejudice comes from with BPD and therapists because they feel like someone with BPD will just say anything, right? So there was a little bit of a difficult time around then, but eventually I did get a psychiatrist who did both talk therapy and monitored my medication. So that was amazing, and he got me off the Ativan and off of I was on Seroquel as well, which was just making me so groggy. So for sure. But then, now having shared my story so many times and spoken publicly about it, I honestly, if there is a stigma on a personal level, one to one with anyone who, maybe in a professional setting or a social setting, I'm not aware of it because I've been so forward about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's a beautiful thing is when you can own your story, it really just, there might be stuff happening around you, but you're unaware of it because you're just being true to yourself. And I know at least that's, what my journey's been like after, being diagnosed with OCD. It's like, it is what it is. And, so I think there's a lot of, to get to that point, it takes a while, but I think once you do, it's really, there's just a lot of weight kind of lifted. Um,
yeah, and there's a lot of misconceptions around OCD as well, right? So
Totally. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's very similar in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And then I do want to get to eventually like kind of how you're doing now and, with what's going on in the world right now. But, I know that you have a lot of hobbies and you picked up a lot of hobbies and things that really make you feel like you. And I find that an interesting part of this as well, because I think that's true for a lot of mental health disorders, like finding things that really kind of light us up. And can you talk a bit about that and like that discovery? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the, biggest hurdles with borderline personality disorder is that you have a weaker sense of self. You have a hard time finding your own identity and you fuse with people around you. And, I, throughout my journey, I spent time, finding who I am and what my actual personality traits are and how to stay true to myself. And and that's when I started the magazine in 2012. And, I had always been a lover of writing, but I just kind of fueled that even stronger through the journey. And, and then over the years, I took a larger interest in fitness and in art. And, I just immersed myself in all of these things to kind of find what would stick and what felt more like me. And yeah, so that was very important because the idea is that if, it's the whole eggs, all of your eggs in one basket type thing. If you have several baskets and, your eggs are spread out throughout all of these baskets, if one falls off, you still have others.
Right.
So if previous to my rehabilitation, I would put all of my eggs in the basket of my relationship, my romantic relationships or my friendships, any interpersonal relationships, which meant that my identity solely depended on all of those relationships working. Um, so, now I've built a more resilient sense of self, um, because I have a lot of interests and I know that if I lose one thing, I still have a lot to offer the world. So, um, yeah. And of course, it's a strange time now because there's a lot of things that I can't go and do, which has its own struggles.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, what what would you say was like a pivotal moment for you in recovery? Like that moment of clarity or things started to shift for you? If there
um,
is one, if you can think of one.
Sort of, yeah. There's like like one of my best friends, Andrew, he always gave me like tough love, which is funny because he might not be knowledgeable in BPD, but it is something that uh, I think that people who struggle with BPD really need. He knew when to tell me that I was being an idiot and when to baby me, but he put it this way. He basically said, the feelings that you have, we all have them. It's just that you have them to the point that you react to them, exponentially. And that sort of like made it clear to me that therapy is really good for me because it's true. We do all have and feel these things, right? We're all human. We all have the capacity to feel anxious or fearful or sad or happy or, whatever. And um, what we have control of is the thoughts, the behaviors, um, and so I learned to be kinder to myself, and I grew a thicker skin in a sense from being kind to myself by saying, these feelings are normal. Everyone knows what it's like to feel anxious or to feel sad or to miss somebody or to feel alone. Um, so just shifting my perspective like that a little helped, for sure. And it's like such a small thing, but he's one of those level-headed people who like he's so level-headed you're almost like, are you a robot? Like how are you so strong and level-headed, and for him to say like I feel those things, Steph, like I have felt those things. It's just that I don't react to them the same way you do, so they don't escalate. And I was
Right.
like, man.
Yeah, I think, for myself too, like I realized that a lot of, the OCD kind of related stuff that happens for me is just not wanting to feel certain things. And so, and just being afraid of feeling ultimately.
Yeah.
And um, I don't know when I developed that fear, and it might be because of the intensity of it. But yeah, I mean, we hear it so much these days is to just like feel your feelings, right? And like it's a really difficult thing to do because, and especially now we can start talking about, what's going on now. But right now, I think, we're used to distracting ourselves and like going on about our day and going from one thing to the next. And right now, it's really hard to run away from what we're feeling. Um, and so that's challenging.
Oh, he just
Is your
commented, this
friend
friend
just
sounds amazing.
yeah, and if there are any questions from anyone that's joined us, feel free to write them in the comment section. But yeah, I guess tell us about how you're doing now. Like I know, um, this is obviously a tough situation in Ottawa. I don't know, like I think it's pretty much the same everywhere. We're all in our houses and kind of on lockdown right now. Um, how's it been going for you?
Yeah, so definitely to kind of pivot back to the whole identity thing, being ingrained in several different hobbies and interests, that maintain your day to day, it is hard now because I think I've actually almost fused or identified with this pandemic in a way. Um, we chatted briefly the other day, and I said I take things so personally now when I see people not taking these guidelines seriously, or putting others at risk. I mean, and why is that, right? I think it is in my nature, and whether that's part of the BPD diagnosis or not, I do tend to dive into stuff and take it personally and roll with it. And you know, my husband said, why do you feel like you have such authority over this? And I do really think it has to do with I'm not focusing on a whole lot of anything else right now. And I do take pride in the fact that I can jump into something and really focus and go all in. But it might not be the most healthy thing to do right now with the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I have
And I
been
think
trying.
you gave a specific example when you were looking out the window and you saw like a mother and daughter, a family or whatever playing in the playground,
Yeah,
and just getting really like worked up about it because it's, like we're all being told to stay at home and we all need to do our part, and just really getting upset about it. Whereas other people could look at that and think, okay, that's not right, but it's not none of my business. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing what I believe is the right thing, and I'm going to
yeah.
go on with my day.
Well, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
To just focus on it and spiral and let it change my mood. So that's I'm trying to pivot away from that a little bit and just focus on the little things like stuff like this where I can try to make a little difference. And yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, we also talked the other day, like there's this, I think the first couple of weeks it was like everyone was kind of in like shock mode, like panic mode, like is the world really closed, and what's actually going on here. And then there's this pressure, at least I feel it. I think everyone feels it because like just looking at Instagram, it's like so much is happening, and like there's this pressure of accomplishing a lot during this time.
yeah.
And it's like this really strong pressure that I feel personally. Um, and so wondering if you feel that as well and how you've been kind of handling that. I know you obviously are still working full time with Shopify, and then you have the other work that you do. How are you coping with that?
Yeah, it's I definitely also feel that pressure, people saying, now you can learn a new language, or you're going to get so ripped and stuff like that. Absolutely there is that pressure, but there are some days that I'm just like I don't feel like doing any of those things, and that's cool. Why is this different? Just because I'm at home more. So I don't know. I'm just trying to be a little bit kinder to myself, but I have had some really bad days. If I burst into tears and just been like, I'm so sick of this, or what's the point? Like
Mm-hmm.
getting up and doing it. What's the point? But I just say to myself what I have always said to myself about anxiety or about bouts of depression, and that's it's temporary. This will pass. It is temporary. And that's really the only thing I can say to make a bit of a difference in my mood. Yeah, I have a friend who does this thing where she goes for her commute walk every morning, as though she's walking to work. So she just gets up and goes on like a 10-minute walk and then is back home and working from home. And so I did that yesterday for the first time. And I was like, yeah, actually, that's a great idea. And I felt a lot better. Um,
Which is
you know,
interesting because I feel like the one thing a lot of people are kind of happy about right now is that they don't have to do the commute.
right, right.
But yeah, if you're walking, then that's better than getting on like a train or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed that the way I engage with people who are working at the pharmacy or the grocery store, I previously used to avoid conversation. and avoid really engaging with them and taking note and being mindful of them. And now I am taking that opportunity to interact with someone and to interact with someone who is doing some very important work right now and is at risk while we can stay at home. So that's completely changed my interaction at, any public space right now,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Like, I think we might have talked about this briefly the other day. And there might be people watching right now that are, that do live alone. I mean, I live alone. I have my dog with me. But I do feel like there might be like this crisis going on right now that we're unaware of, people that are prone to mental health challenges, that are being triggered right now and potentially are suffering with severe depression. And whether they are still working or not, we're all remote right now. Like you can easily sign in and then just like go back to bed. And I worry about people like that right now. And um, what are your thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say and acknowledge that like I am definitely in a place of privilege right now. I have a nice home. I have a full paycheck. I live with my partner and our dog, and we live in an area where there's a lot of woods, so we can go walking freely. And the thing is that I think that what's so important right now is that those of us who have the emotional and mental capacity and the physical energy to reach out to people that we know are home alone or maybe are forced to be at home in a situation that is not necessarily ideal. Even if this means someone is 16 and is struggling with mental health issues, but their family, maybe their culture doesn't necessarily um, feel that mental health is even real. That is definitely a struggle that I know people are facing, and it's just magnified right now. So I think that for those of us who have all the resources and who have the emotional ability and are further along in our mental health journey, I think we really need to reach out to those people. I even if they're just an acquaintance, even if they're just someone who follows you on Instagram or you happen to have on Facebook, whatever, it could be a coworker. I think it's really important that each of us right now reaches out to those people because I can say for a fact that when I was at my lowest, anyone reaching out, if I didn't really know them, it didn't feel like some weird imposition that they were reaching out to me. I didn't feel strange about it. I was appreciative. And I think now more than at any of those times it would be even more welcomed. So I think it's really, really important that we check in with them. Again, even if they're just an acquaintance, even if you happen to know that their situation isn't ideal.
yeah, I think I had a friend that was on a Zoom call the other day for work, and she noticed one of her teammates wasn't on the call, and she knew that he lived alone, and so she thought, maybe I should call him because I'm not sure why he didn't turn up to this call. And she called him, no answer, a few times, no answer, and eventually he did answer, and he said, like, I'm not doing well right now, I'm not getting out of bed, and luckily she noticed that he wasn't on the call, but oftentimes you just assume, oh, he probably told the director or whoever, so and so, that he wasn't able to join the call today. And then you would just ignore it, right? So it's like we really got to think about those people that are living alone. And even though they might be, like I said, they might be working full time still. Um, I think, like what you said, I think reaching out is welcome. I think if they're experiencing like depression symptoms, so some of the thought process could be like, nobody cares, no one's going to notice. What's the point anyway? All that kind of thing. So having people reach out is going to be instrumental. And unfortunately, we have all this live content that we're developing with Made of Millions, but unfortunately, some of those people aren't going online right now, right?
Yeah.
And so hopefully there's a phone that they have nearby, and there are crises text line, and I know here in Ontario, the government has put out a lot more resources for mental health services, and in the US, there's obviously a lot of crises text lines and things like that. So it's just a matter of getting that information out to people that really need it.
Yes, absolutely. And again, like for those of us who are able-bodied and further along in our journey and healthier, I do think like it's almost like this duty that we have right now because I no one understands better than someone who's been through it. It's super hard. Like you can do your best to try to understand, but unless you've been through it, you really don't know. And those are the kinds of people that, really want to hear from you. Yeah, I think about, you know, I also, yeah, I'm really thinking about people who are also stuck at home in, not ideal situations where they are suppressing mental health symptoms or whatever. And I just know that when I was going through tough times, even just that like short conversation, even if I'm not fully focused and present in that conversation, at least I'm not fully focusing on my negative thoughts. So it does like make a difference, and any small difference counts for sure.
Hmm. Um, I don't know if we have any questions for Stephanie. I don't see anything that has popped up yet other than a few comments. But I know that there are like different types of borderline personality disorder, or sorry, there are different types of personality disorders. Specifically with borderline personality disorder, what are like the main symptoms? And have you like experienced all of them? Have you experienced some more than others? Just for like an educational purpose, if you could share that with us.
Yeah, totally. So the biggest one is obviously fear of abandonment, which we kind of went over for like a moment there about my relationships. But there's also compulsive behaviors. So it could be anything from spending a lot of money to just having like a lot of sexual intercourse suddenly. It could be a severe eating habit, just very compulsive and extreme behavior. Um,
And is
and then
that to relieve like certain emotions? Is it
yeah,
intentional?
so it's like a lack of impulse control based on yeah, your intense emotions. Like it's not necessarily to cope, but it's almost just like expression of or something. So yeah, like it's but the fear of abandonment is the biggest one because it almost materializes these other behaviors. So one of them is it's often perceived as manipulation, but really what it is someone is so afraid that you'll leave them that they'll go to incredible extent, they'll go to incredible lengths to prevent you from leaving them. So, the fear of abandonment really fuels a lot of the other telltale signs. So, like there's the sense of identity, which is the core of it. You have a lack of strong sense of self, which then is why you have such a strong fear of people leaving you because they make you who you are. You've fused your identity with them.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's like this like black and white thinking, which I have done quite a bit of in my time. So it's basically like you tend to uh, hold people on a pedestal or you demonize them, right? They're either you either idealize or you demonize, and it's the same with all kinds of things. Like this is bad, this is good. Um, and then yeah, the impulsive stuff, which I never had to too much of an extreme degree, other than the my recklessness to kind of impose danger on myself. Um, and yeah, the emotions, obviously the intense, uncontrollable emotions. So that is a really important symptom because that that will tell the difference between someone who might just have an anxiety disorder or be depressed versus they're actually triggered by something, right? Like I think I explained this in my last talk with Made of Millions that I'm pretty stable until something happens. Um, something good, something bad. Like otherwise I'm just at like a steady stream of emotion that's within like a normal spectrum. But as soon as something happens, it's just either the worst thing in the world or the best thing in the world, and I roll with that. So that's really important to point out. It's not like every day we're feeling down in the dumps. We're just reacting to stuff that is happening either around us or a result of some of our previous behaviors. So, and then the other big telltale sign is unstable personal relationships. So, any kind of interpersonal relationship is often really intense and chaotic, and with the case of romantic relationships, they start really strong and they become really passionate and intense really quickly. They get serious really quickly, that kind of thing. So sometimes there's disassociation, which I have not had, luckily, but there's also like a distorted self-image, which to a degree I have also experienced. But all of these, are accompanied with depression and anxiety and stuff, but they are, a result of those
Yeah.
triggers.
When you talk about identity, like, I think I know I've experienced it where it was like, what am I meant to be doing in this world? Who am I really like? Um, what would you say is the difference between like a normal or what most people experience in terms of trying to figure out their place in the world versus when it can become um, more of a like challenging thing to deal with?
Mhm.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I
Because I
mean,
think we all, to an extent, like struggle with trying to figure out who we are and our identity at different
yeah,
points in our lives.
I think the difference is like, so for example, I have always been and will always be really outspoken and pretty honest to a fault. So I know that that's part of me. That is not something that I've fused with the people around me. Of course, I'm a product of my parents and my upbringing, like anyone else. But because I know that that's part of who I am, I spent time like playing into that, which is why I'm able to share my story with people. If I didn't really have that, strength, which can sometimes be a weakness, then I would be less inclined to share my story and to be open with people. Um, but so yeah, I think that like, it's not so much about the hobbies and it's not so much about the interests and it's not so much about your skills, but more so, what that brings out in you. Like if you're learning a new sport and you suck at it, you might have fun and still suck. But it's bringing out in you your sense of, adventure and wanting to learn, and those are great things. So I think it's really important to notice that in ourselves as opposed to putting the emphasis on what it is you're doing. And it's more like it's coming from something, but it doesn't matter where it's coming from. The point is that it's bringing it to the surface. So the difference with that and fusing your identity to people around you, which we all do to an extent, of course, because we make compromises. If our partner or mom or whoever wants to do something, we'll sometimes do those things even if we don't want to do them, to make them happy. That's not what fusing your identity is, right? It's you become validated by that person. So you start to take on their interest and you want them to be your own because you're afraid that if you don't, they won't love you or they'll leave you or you won't have anything in common, that kind of thing. So, people with BPD tend to do that to an extreme degree. And they put all of the importance on how, on what the health check of that relationship is to their self-worth. You know, if my relationship is going well, then I am good. And if it's not, then I'm worthless. So that's like the difference is grabbing that self-worth from things that really actually come from within. It's just that activities or relationships pull that out of you. Um, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think like it's all a spectrum, right? Like we can all experience certain things to a degree, but like it's when it becomes, to a point where we can't handle it anymore, and you're turning up at the doctor because you're having these anxiety attacks. It's then it's a problem and it needs to be something that you need to get help for, right?
Yeah.
Before that, we can all experience bouts of like anxiety and trying to figure out who we really are. And, you know, I know in the past I've dated guys that I found were really interesting and did really cool things because at the time I wasn't really doing anything cool. So like I was inspired by them, and and I kind of felt like it wasn't the healthiest thing at the time, but it was what it was. And so, yeah, it's more so when it becomes to be an issue, and it's all of your entire energy is going towards that then it's time to reach out for help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's really hard to advocate for yourself when you're in this like crazy spiral of emotions all over you. And, it's not to say that like I expect that people with BPD should just go out there and, lay everything on the table like I have. It took a long time for me to get there. Um, and there's something cathartic about this as well, right? Like I don't just do this for the good of sharing my story. It's also cathartic. It also feels like one of those outlets where I do get to talk about things that I might not talk about every day.
Yeah, and I think when you go through your own recovery, at least I know for myself, like I've learned so much, and I want to be able to share that in case there's one thing that I say that someone can relate to. And like we had just had a comment, I don't
Yeah.
know what makes so much sense, but she said that was a very big aha moment. So I think that makes it all worth it. I think we're coming kind of to the end, but I don't know what time it is actually. Anyhow, any other things that you wanted to share with the audience, just about your experience over the years? And I guess for anyone that might be questioning, oh, like this might be something I can really relate to, like where would they begin to like start seeking help?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I touched on this a little bit before, but there wasn't like a whole lot of help there for me. I dropped my phone. Oh my gosh, I'm shaking. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of help there for me or resources there for me when I was starting to fall. So I think it's definitely important to start seeking those resources while you still can. But again, like I would think that a lot of health um, healthcare systems in the world are similar to Canada's in the sense that they're very reactive as opposed to preventative. So that's just that's just a reality of the healthcare system. So it will be harder to get, for example, if you're in Ontario, it will be harder to get a psychiatrist that's covered by OHIP sooner than, paying for a psychologist. So it's really difficult. And you can get all of those things and resources once you're hospitalized, but the idea is that we don't want to be hospitalized. We don't want to get to that point. So, for borderline personality disorder, I would say that it is really important to first look at what the telltale signs are, if you identify with those. And if you do, then definitely talk to your doctor and try to advocate for yourself the best you can. Because having a diagnosis for certain things is really, really important. I know it was for BPD because it meant tackling a problem a little bit differently. You know, for years, I had just seen my family doctor and they were like, oh, you're just depressed or you're anxious, so here's medication. But then when I finally got a diagnosis and saw a psychiatrist regularly, he was like, well, you're not depressed, so I'm not giving you antidepressants. Like, that's not, you know, he's like, you react to, you know, your emotions explode from things that happen. You're not the kind of person that wakes up and is just feeling numb. You feel okay and then you don't because something happened.
Right.
So it honestly, it really helps in your path to recovery because there's going to be different therapies and different methods depending on what it is that's actually wrong with you. Because I did think that I was depressed for so long and anxious because that's what my doctor was telling me.
Yeah. And then ultimately you wouldn't be doing the right things to get better. I mean, I imagine CBT, is across the board, but there's CBT for depression, CBT for OCD, CBT for borderline personality disorder. So all different kind of takes on it depending on what you're dealing with.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly it. Like with CBT, what we focused on was that fear of abandonment. And it really changed my life. Because now and especially with the pandemic, like I kind of have integrated it with practicing mindfulness in a sense, right? Like I'm doing the CBT while I'm being mindful. So I am able to identify like what those hot thoughts are, and all of the evidence for it and the evidence against it, and then come to terms with that emotion and feeling and then move on.
Can you give us an example of something that's come up during this time? Or
Yeah.
if
I
you can
mean,
think
if
of
we
one?
just take a look at, like I mentioned, like kind of feeling like, what's the point the other day, right? And, um, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, what's the point? And then I started to feel anxious. And I think the anxiety is from restlessness. So what I did was, okay, I'm feeling anxious because I'm feeling restless because I said, what's the point? Which means like, why should I get up and do anything? Why should I try and work? Why should I do this? Um, but all of that, I realized stemmed from a place of restlessness because I was feeling a little bit anxious due to the fact that like I had nowhere to put any energy.
Right.
And so I said to myself, like I said earlier, what's the point? Well, yeah, okay, like today, like focus on today because this is all temporary. We will get to hang out with our friends and family again. I will get to go to live concerts again. So focus on today. So I'm anxious today. So what am I going to do today and in this moment? Yeah, and honestly, like it sounds laborious, but all of that happened in a matter of, I don't know, 30 seconds.
It's interesting because if I had that thought, what's the point? Like that to me is a scary thought for my brain because it means I'm going in a direction that's not good for me. And so I latch on to that thought and I'll obsess over that thought. Why did I think that? What does that mean? And so it's interesting that, I know a lot of people have such a negative, they feel like, why do we have to diagnose everything, right? And it's true. And like, it is about the symptoms and stuff like that. But all of our brains are so differently, like how you reacted to that thought is different than how I reacted to that thought. And therefore my kind of CBT behavior, like what I would do then to react to that in a positive way or a healthy way would be different than what you did, which I find
Right.
really fascinating because
Like what
I
do
would
you
just go down the trap of obsessing about it all day and not being able to do anything because I was like, I look at that as like a thought that's like almost like contaminated my brain that I need to get rid of.
hmm. So with OCD, like, so how do you get out of that? Like,
A lot of mindfulness for me because I ruminate a lot on that thought. So it would just be a matter of like, okay, I had that thought. What's the point? Like I had it because of what's going on right now, and there's a lot going on in the world right now. So acknowledging the thought, but like at the end of the day, I'm going to go and do what's important to me, which is going and talking to staff on Instagram Live because, you know, I'm passionate about getting content out there that's going to help people right now. And so going back to like my core beliefs and my core values,
Yeah.
because I know that the noise and like anything outside is just noise, and ultimately I have to come back to myself.
Mm. So she was just asking what CBT is. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just like a method of therapy to essentially attack those thoughts, right? Like you have emotions and they are often stemmed from negative thinking and thoughts. So the idea is that if you can change those thoughts, then you can change your feelings. Um, yeah, and that's essentially what it is.
Yeah,
But
and I
yeah,
think it's not so much about changing the thoughts, it's just about not putting so much weight on them and like
yeah,
looking on if they're facts versus just like a passing thought,
yeah,
which we're not really taught when we're younger. You know, we look at thoughts as being like they must mean something, and feelings too. And, you know, I know with mindfulness, and I don't know if you know about Tara Brach, the meditation, mindfulness. She's a clinician in the States. Anyhow, she has this thing called RAIN, where it's like recognize. Okay, I'm gonna totally butcher it, but anyhow, she's brilliant. If you want to check her out, Tara Brach, Tarabrach, and it's really just about accepting and acknowledging thoughts and feelings as they are, and just letting them kind of flow through you,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
not
that's
latching onto them.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Like and eventually with CBT, like I said, it's just like everywhere with me and I use it as much as I can in my head, but you do start out, writing it down and um which, of course, like it was like long and hard and but it really did help. And it helped to not again to yeah not identifying like hold on to those thoughts so much, right? Like they're not necessarily your thoughts aren't demonstrating truth
Yeah.
necessarily.
Or who you are. Yeah. Because if you did hold on to that, what's the point thought, then you would have just stayed in bed
Yeah, yeah,
because that would be your reality in your brain. You know, what's the point? Okay, I'm going to stay here rather than, like you said, it's temporary. I will eventually get to, you know, get out and see my friends. Um, you know,
and another thing I say to myself often, and I do say to friends and family if I'm trying to help them through either anxiety or difficult times, is because you can apply this to anything. If you are feeling like what's the point, or you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling something is strained, well, the idea isn't to just like not feel those things. You just have to make the time pass. Like it's better to do something rather than to sit there because the time will pass slower. So you're going to feel that stronger and for longer. So it's, even if you're just going through the motions of doing stuff, it will help pass the time faster. And that can be so beneficial to just getting to the next day. And I know that sounds like, really dreary, but that's how you get through to the other side.
yeah, I think often, again, we want to like run away from the feelings, or in my case, I want to problem solve them. What does this mean? Like, why am I feeling this way? And it just makes it stay longer. And like, so that's why I try really hard, especially during this time where I am feeling more anxious and like my mood is a bit more, you know, unstable right now because of just lack of stimulation, really. And it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna cook dinner right now because I need to eat, you know, and it's just like going through, and sometimes it feels robotic because you just don't feel like it at the time, but it's better than sitting there and just like being in it, you know, like you're still feeling it, you're not running away from it, but you're moving, you
Yeah.
know, like you're whatever it is, you know, and to be honest, like I've had a hard time concentrating lately because there's just so many distractions. And now at nighttime, like the last couple nights, I was just like binge watching a TV show. And I actually was like kind of forcing myself to do it as like a discipline because I'm like, you need to like focus on TV right now, like, which is so ridiculous because usually we use it as like an escape. But right now, I just feel like I I haven't done as much as I wanted to on a day, so I don't feel like I necessarily deserve to like sit in front of the TV because it's like
So,
usually a reward, right?
yeah.
And so I'm sitting there like I should be doing something else, but now I'm like kind of like giving myself permission and like actually trying to see it as a discipline. Like you're gonna sit here for 2 hours and watch TV,
Yeah.
which
No,
is really
absolutely.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like I honestly, I think that everyone is having a very hard time focusing right now. I know that, my boss at work, he also said the same thing. Like I can't seem to focus. My mind is on all these different things, and absolutely, like I think that this pandemic has a real good way of making things feel trivial. Um, and that's why I have those moments of what's the point. Like, what's the point? People are getting sick and dying. What's the point? And it's not like I can go do anything about it. What's the point? But
Mhm.
really, we do have to give ourselves permission to take some sort of joy in the really small wins, whether that's getting to sit down and watch TV, whether that's being able to focus on one task at work for a few minutes, like whatever. But it is very hard to focus right now. I think everyone's feeling like that.
Yeah.
I personally feel like I'm kind of in a brain fog. I've been in a fog for weeks because, uh, like my mind is being spread thin towards all of these different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hope that, who knows how long it's going to happen, but I do think I see shifts like the first few weeks were like panic mode and like a lot of like high energy around like what are we going to do? Everyone crazy shopping at the grocery store. And now I feel it's dipped and everyone's kind of like it's like energy is lower and it's a bit more of a like I don't know, just feels more of like a bleak time. And then hopefully we kind of adjust and can make the most of it right now. But it's definitely, I mean, we've never been faced with it, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think we have a minute and 54 seconds. We have a countdown going on here. I guess
Oh,
the lives are an hour exactly. But
oh,
anything else you wanted to share before we sign off? Like I said, we'll have this posted online on our site, so I'll send you over the link once it's up so that you can share it with your community. But yeah, any last thoughts?
just again, if you have the emotional and mental capacity to reach out to people that you think are alone or are stuck at home in a situation that is not ideal, please reach out to them. It's really, really important. Even if you're just acquaintances, again, like it's not gonna be received like super weird or anything. Like I can say from experience in the past, it really makes a difference. So we really gotta look out for each other right now, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I always love talking to you, and I've enjoyed watching, the videos that I found online of your talks, and maybe we can post some of those in the comment section when we post this on our website, because I know they helped me and I really related to them. So thanks again, and yeah, I'm sure we'll do something again together soon. And I appreciate your time and
Well,
say hi to your husband and your dog for me.
yeah. I mean, thanks for having me. It's always great to have these conversations. So I'm
Okay.
I'm honored. All
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
right. Bye.
Bye.